Welcome back, my name's Anica and today we're going to paint a rainbow bee eater. You may have joined me in my previous video where I went through the entire process, step by step, how to draw him. You can also download this sketch, there's a link in the description below, or you might like to see the 12-minute video, the description's there as well. Let's get started. To simplify the painting process, I'm pre-mixing some very watery paint I'll be using for the initial wash. I'm using my pipette to measure out 2.5 mils of water and placing it in each of the 3 wells. By fully squeezing the pipette, that's the amount I get, so that makes it easy. I'll be mixing Hansa Yellow Medium, Quinacridone Coral and Pthalo Blue Green shade. I'm also placing a little bit of thicker paint into the round well. It's a great idea to have some scraps of paper for testing colours. Before I start, I also need to mix a very pale mix of green-blue for his upper body, chest and sides, also very watery. My palette is here so you can see it, and so is my paper towel. Now we're ready to get started. I'm using Arches cold press paper 300 GSM and a no-name round brush with a good point. With clean water, I'm wetting everything except the beak and the eye area. By lifting your painting towards the light, you'll soon see if you've missed any spots. Because the wash is very diluted, we don't want the paper to be too wet, so I need to wait a minute for the water to absorb until most of the shine loses its gloss. Finally, some paint. So I'm going for the yellow for the head and testing it on some paper. I can see that it's very, very light. So just adding a little bit more yellow pigment, drop yellow into the head part, just little droplets all over the head for the eye area. And they will just spread of their own accord. Now, even though this area isn't particularly yellow, it doesn't matter. We're creating a work of art, a beautiful feeling representational piece of a very colourful bird, so if the colours mingle a little bit more, who cares? It's just so much nicer. I'm now adding that very, very pale green that we mixed up, and that's on the top part of his body and the wing area, and also a little bit on his chest. I'm washing my brush, tapping it off, and then testing my blue on the paper. I'm starting down here because it's going to creep up to the green anyway, and I'm not painting right up to it, allowing the blue to travel on its own and not get too mingled. Washing my brush, drying it on the paper. Now I can just gently tap these colours together. I can see on my reference photo that he has a little bit of yellow down here. The colours will get darker later, so we're not worried at the moment. I've dipped my brush into the green, but I've added a tiny little bit of the blue here because he seems to be a little bit more blue in there. And I am staying away from the yellow with a sliver of white, tapping my brush dry and just soaking up some of that extra liquid. Doing the same again, washing my brush, tapping it dry and gently blending this blue in a little bit too. I'm continuing with the blue right down to the bottom of the tail so that we have a base to work on. And now that we've done this, we need to let it dry. I now need to mix my very important neutral out of these 3 primary colours. On toothpicks, I'm just picking up a little bit of each colour, the red, yellow and blue, putting them on my palette, and with only a little bit of water, mixing this very handy dark neutral. I'm keeping it quite thick because I'll need it thicker at times, and I can use it as a black and I can use it to make shadows. See the beautiful really dark colour that we're achieving? At the moment it looks a little bit purpley black, But all I have to do to change the tone of this colour is to add a little bit more yellow to make it more black, and if it's too blue, a little bit of orange to make it more black, or to go back to blue, a little bit more blue. So it's just whatever we need. We've got it all there in these three colours. It's pretty humid here today, so I'm placing some paper towel on my painting underneath my hands so that I don't mark the paper with any excess oil. I've washed my brush and am now gently re-wetting the top of the head, above the eye area and below the eye area. I'm now picking up some thicker red paint and putting it up into this corner and taking a little bit of yellow to make it more orangey. I am now just going to dab it into the top of the head and look at the beautiful way it spreads. Wipe my brush. I think it needs a little bit more yellow, so I'm just going to put a bit more yellow up there. Now with some orange, come into this area here, and that's going to spread on its own accord. The green in my palette is way too watery, so I need to get some thicker blue and yellow to make a lovely bright green and add it to the forehead area. Wash my brush, pat it dry, and just dab the edges so they're not so harsh. For his throat, I need to mix a nice chestnut, rich chestnut colour. It'll be with yellow and red to make the orange, and then with a tiny bit of blue, it'll become a beautiful chestnutty brown colour. Alright, now we're going to leave that alone. So now we're moving on to his wing area. On the reference photo, you can see the ear shape that we spoke about in our drawing video. I'm now mixing up a deeper green with the yellow blue and a teeny touch of red and putting this ear shape in. I'm then lifting out some highlights with my washed and dried brush, then adding a slightly darker value up near the highlights to accentuate them more. And when they've blended in all together, I can now take a tissue and dab out the highlight again. I'm now adding another layer of blue to the back feathers. Coming into the next layer of the secondary feathers, and I'm extending this blue down this side of the blue feathers. I'm going to make a shape like this with my tissue. The shape possibly slightly represents a feather. So if I just press that on that side, I'm getting highlights in a feathery type of shape. Time to let it dry or speed it up. I'm now adding a light layer of phthalo blue to the area underneath his eye, of his beak, the malar area. While that's drying, let's go down to the feathers, the secondary and the primary feathers. I can see in there that there's a little bit of shadowing, which is of a chestnut nature, so I'm going to put that in with the chestnut colour. And then with a clean soft brush, gently softening the edges. I'm now switching over to a smaller brush. This is a size 6, but anything 4, 5 or 6, anything like that would be great. In preparation for the darker part of the wings, I'm adding some of my neutral mix to phthalo blue. I'm coming in under those secondary coverts which are here. So it's like negative painting because we're painting around something. See those there? And just a little bit down here and a little bit down there. Now I'm going to wash my brush, pat it dry, and spread this out a little bit. Now with a little bit more of the same type of colour, I'm coming in there and a little bit pulling a feather mark here and a feather mark there, and that'll do just washing my brush and patting it dry a bit and spreading this out. We're going to come back into this again to just add a few little darks in there. Now going to our mixed blackish area, the blackish paint. It's gone very dry, so I need to wet my brush a little bit. I'm going to come along the border of the secondary feathers and just add a few dabs like this, and it goes right down to this area in here. So I need to soften it a little bit with a clean brush. You know, what I can see is I made a bit of a blunder. So this is what happens if you do a bit of a blunder. It's still wet. I'm going to wet that and I'm going to pat it dry. And I'll just do that again. I'm going to wet it because that dark line's meant to be a little bit lower. If we want things to be right, we just got to do it like that. Okay. Doesn't matter that you can see it a little bit, but I do need to let it dry now. While that's drying, let's move on to the primary feathers. Let's move on to the primary feathers with our dark neutral color and some blue, and leave little gaps in there to separate the feathers. I think it'll be dry enough now. I'm going to come in with those bars which are actually meant to be here. A little bit of the blue again with a touch of red to make it just a little bit more subdued. I'm going to pull a little shadow over here and a little separation between the feathers there and there. Alright, that's going okay. We can also pull some separations up here. Not too much, just a little bit. And going back to the eye area. So what happens up here is I'm now going to wet the beak with clean water and going in with some of our special black, coming in, starting on the bottom like that, and a little bit on the top, and then with a clean dampened brush I'm just spreading those colours out a little bit so they're thinner here. I'm leaving a little white gap, and then with the thicker black paint around the eye. At the moment it's still pretty light, but that's okay. It's better to do it that way than to get it too dark. But now I've picked up some darker paint, and this is a shadowed area in here around the eye, and it's a bit shadowed in there. Some more of the dark colour. I'm going to pull a little partial line for the separation of his beak. Oops. I'm adding some coral red with a touch of yellow to make it a dark orange for his eye, leaving a little white gap up the top for the highlight. And it'll look like that for starters. And come back down to his allure feathers and mix a deeper olive green with the yellow, blue and a touch of red, and add in those allure feathers that hang off the primary feathers like the little bit off a chicken wing. Adding in some shadowing of the wing and accentuating the little bend in his wing, and then softening it all with a clean brush. To give our bee eater some life, we need to work on his eye. To give his eye some natural form, I need to mix some darker red with Quinacridone Coral and the neutral black that we've created from our three colours. I'm going to add these to his eye. Then I need to paint around the highlight, all over the eye, except for the little bit opposite the highlight, which I will leave bright red. And then later on come in with the actual pupil. Alright, so now with some dark I'm going to go around his iris on the inside and also add some dark for his iris. And now look, his eye looks better straight away. We can add some dark around the eye, and I'm going to paint the white circle that's around his eye. I'm going to shadow the top half of it with a little bit of light blue. And look, doesn't he look nice? With our neutral black, I'm now adding some shadows to his dark eye mask. Having put in the various feather groups, we don't need to fuss over the individual feathers too much. There's the alulas, the secondary feathers in there, the tertiaries, and then down below we have the primary feathers. I'm going to deepen the shadows there between the secondary feathers. I'm going to separate those. I'm going to go over with my blackish colour. I need to come down, leaving some white lines in there. They're not exactly in the same spot, but it doesn't matter, just as long as it's conveying the message of what we want to convey. And I've washed my brush and squeezed it. I'm going to lift a little bit of paint like that just for some variance, and then with some thick black, I say black but you know it's our black from these three colours, and put in a shadow between the feathers, and this shadow is also underneath these feathers. Now let's move on to the feet. Washing my brush, and with a very light mixture of this neutral black colour, I'm going to add a little bit of yellow and a little bit of orange just to make it a warm grey, and just put little dots into the toes, multiple toes. Now I'm going to pat it gently with a tissue, and it's looking like that. When that's dry, I can add the claws. It's now time to wet the branch, and then just drop in any of the colours on my palette, the more the merrier. There's a little bit of pink, orange, brown, yellow. Here we go, it's a bit of a dark browny colour, and I'm going to dab this on the bottom of the branch and just let it do its own thing as it works its way up the branch. And when this is just a tad drier, I can have a slightly thicker mixture of this colour. So we need a bit of our do-it-yourself black, and just add a few more little dark bits. With a soft but stiffish brush, I'm lifting out some of the light blue out of his face, and then adding some dark to accentuate the light blue. Some shadow under his beak in his throat area. I ended up painting over his his big toe, so now I have to scrub it out and then lay in the claws. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to give me a thumbs up, that would be fantastic. If you'd like to subscribe, that would be really, really good. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at my next video. Thanks a lot, and see you next time. Bye for now.